Feijiang Starting From Xiliang Introduction. www.zhaozhuiyuan.com. Leaving Dongzhuo, occupying Wudu County, entering Longxi, attacking Matang, defeating Han Sui, dominating Xiliang, and starting to compete for world dominance. https://www.zhaozhuiyuan.com. Chapter 1. I am Lv Fengxian. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. Lv Fengxian suddenly sat up from the bed, stunned by the sight before him. The familiar white walls have now transformed into antique wooden beams, and a faint ink fragrance permeates the air. Looking down at his arm, his muscles were clearly more developed than before, seemingly containing infinite power. A strange feeling surged in my heart, as if my height had also increased significantly. Filled with doubts, Lv Fengxian's gaze wandered around and finally found a copper mirror cabinet in a corner of the room. Quickly walking over, what was reflected in the bronze mirror was a powerful and handsome general. The general's eyes were sharp like lightning, and there was a heroic aura between his eyebrows, which was completely different from the memory of himself in Lv Fengxian's memory. What exactly is going on? Lv Fengxian murmured to himself, his heart filled with confusion. Just as I was trying to clear my mind, a knock on the door interrupted my thinking. "General, are you awake?" A respectful voice came from outside the door. Lv Fengxian frowned slightly, although he was still a bit uncomfortable with this new identity. He knew he had to adapt to this new environment as soon as possible. "Here we go," the deep voice responded with an unquestionable dignity. The door slowly opened, and a soldier in armor stood outside the door. Upon seeing Lv Fengxian, he immediately stood in awe and saluted. "General, are you still going to the school field to train soldiers today?" the soldier asked. Lv Fengxian was stunned for a moment, and his memory of this era was still very vague in his mind. To understand why one appears here, one must first understand the specific situation of this era. Training on the campus. Lv Fengxian asked tentatively. "Yes, General." The soldier replied, "Didn't you schedule General Zhang and General Gao to compete on the school field today?" Lv Fengxian struggled to search for memories of this era in his mind, and gradually, some intermittent scenes began to emerge. In these scenes, there is one's own heroic posture on the school field, one's confrontation with generals such as Zhang Liao and Gao Shun, and one's own heroic performance on the battlefield. "Yes, how could I forget?" Lv Fengxian smiled, "Go lead my general's red rabbit horse." "I'm going to the school field." The soldier immediately responded to the words and turned to prepare for the red hare horse. Lv Fengxian began to silently organize his thoughts in his heart. It has been a while since I traveled through this era and gradually accepted the fact that I became Lu Bu. Although little is known about the specific situation of this era, in order to survive here, it is necessary to adapt to this new environment as soon as possible. Accompanied by soldiers, Lv Fengxian arrived at the campus. Zhang Liao and Gao Shun have been waiting there for a long time. Seeing Lv Fengxian coming, the two immediately welcomed him. "Fengxian, how about today's competition between me, Gao Shun, and the three of us?" Zhang Liao suggested. The sunlight sprinkled on the vast campus, stretching the shadows of soldiers and flags long. Lv Fengxian, the soul that had just crossed into this world, was standing on the sidelines, looking at Zhang Liao with a strange and complex gaze. "My body is still feeling a bit uncomfortable, and I know I need to adapt to all of this as soon as possible." Zhang Liao in front of him, with his burly figure and stern face, is undoubtedly a close comrade of Lu Bu, the former owner of this body. "Wen Yuan, is Boeing coming alone, or are you two coming together?" Lv Fengxian took a deep breath and tried his best to make his voice sound calm. Clearly, in this world full of passion and iron, strength is the key to everything. Zhang Liao glanced at him without showing much surprise. Obviously he had already sensed something from Lv Bu's abnormality. "I'll come first. When I can't hold on, Bo Jing, you'll come and help me," he said in a deep voice. Wei Yu, Cheng Lian, Wei Su, and others gathered around when they saw that Lv Bu, Zhang Liao, and Gao Shun were going to compete in martial arts. Their faces were filled with excitement and curiosity, indicating that such scenes were not common in military camps. Lv Fengxian's heartbeat was a bit fast, knowing that this was the emotional influence left by the original owner. Striving to calm down his emotions, his gaze was fixed on Zhang Liao. "I know that the upcoming competition will determine my position in the military and even affect my survival in this world." Zhang Liao was the first to launch an attack, and the yellow dragon hook moon blade was like a tiger, with the sound of breaking through the sky echoing throughout the school field. Lv Fengxian gritted his teeth and waved the Fangtianhua halberd in his hand, responding in an almost instinctive way. His heart was clear, and all distractions disappeared at this moment. Every collision seemed to shatter my soul, but I persisted exceptionally every time. Sweat and blood are intertwined, unable to distinguish each other. My vision is a bit blurry, but my goal is exceptionally clear. I want to live and find my place in this world. Time seems to have come to a halt at this moment. Lv Fengxian only felt that his strength was gradually losing, while Zhang Liao's figure became increasingly clear. Find Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com to understand that you have reached your limit. Just as I was about to give up, suddenly a strange force emerged from within. It is the power brought by the reinvigoration of Lu Bu's body in this era, and also his last reliance in this new world. With a loud shout, Fang Tianhua's halberd flashed a dazzling golden light, reaching straight at Zhang Liao's throat. A hint of surprise flashed in Zhang Liao's eyes, but the yellow dragon hook moon blade in his hand rushed forward without any hesitation. Two powerful forces collided in the air, making deafening sounds. The crowd on the school field only felt a flash in front of them, followed by a silence. When everything calmed down, Lv Fengxian and Zhang Liao remained deadlocked. Their gaze intertwined in the air, as if an indescribable emotion flowed through it. Wei Yu, Cheng Lian, Wei Su and others widened their eyes, unable to believe everything they saw in front of them. The competition between Lv Bu, Zhang Liao, and Gao Shun unexpectedly resulted in such a result. Lv Fengxian took a deep breath and knew that the world had completely accepted him. He smiled slightly and said to Zhang Liao, "Brother Wen Yuan, our battle is not over yet." Zhang Liao remained silent for a moment, then smiled and said, "Okay, let's fight again next time." Lv Bu said to Song Xiancheng and others, "Have you seen enough? Do you have nothing to do? If you have nothing to do, go feed me horses. Ho Chengwei, you can either go to the school field to compare and see if your strength has improved, or go patrol the military camp." Everyone immediately left and they heard Lv Bu's words and became their own. Lu Bu thought to himself, "Now in Chang'an, we need to find a way to leave Dongzhuo. We can't kill Dongzhuo yet, and then bear the charge of killing our father. By the way, we can use Wang Yun," and said, "Zhang Liao and Gao Shun, come with me to camp. I have something to discuss with you." After saying this, Zhang Liao and Gao Shun looked at each other and followed Lu Bu's footsteps. Chapter 2. Provide strategies and suggestions. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, as the sunset sets, the candles in the military camp sway in the wind, and the warm yellow light inside the camp appears particularly warm. Lv Bu is sitting opposite Zhang Liao and Gao Shun, two confidants, in the camp. Their eyes were deep, and their faces were filled with confusion and worry. Now that Dongzhuo has become a national thief that everyone is shouting and fighting against, should we continue to follow Dongzhuo or not? Lu Bu's words were resolute, but more of a sense of helplessness. I deeply understand that the decision at this moment will determine their future destiny. Zhang Liao remained silent for a moment, and a hint of determination flashed in his eyes. Dongzhuo's actions have lost his heart. Continuing to follow him may have no hope for the future. We should consider our own future. Gao Shun nodded in agreement and said, Dong Zhuo is cruel and ruthless, and everyone should be punished. Continuing to follow him will only lead us into an irreversible situation. Liu Bu took a deep breath and looked at his two confidants. I know what you mean, but Dong Zhuo has a huge influence. If we leave him now, we may encounter unforeseen circumstances. Zhang Liao's eyes were firm. Life and death are predetermined, wealth and honor are in heaven. We cannot give up our morality due to fear. Gao Shun also said, General, if the three of us work together, the world can be determined. Why be constrained by Dong Zhuo? Liu Bu was moved in his heart and looked at the two close friends in front of him. He had already made up his mind and said, okay, then let's look for an opportunity to leave Dong Zhuo and find our own future. By the way, Wen Yuan, can you tell us where we should go after leaving Dong Zhuo? Lv Fengxian's tone was somewhat confused and tired. Becoming a fierce general under Dong Zhuo's command, Liu Bu knew that continuing to follow Dong Zhuo would undoubtedly lead to death. Zhang Liao remained silent for a moment, with a hint of determination in his eyes. Lord, I think we should go back to our hometown in Bingzhou. Bingzhou. Liu Bu frowned slightly, knowing that Bingzhou was his current hometown, but the worldly wisdom there had long been forgotten. Yes, my lord. Zhang Liao continued, Bingzhou is located on the border, with a simple and honest people. Moreover, my lord has a high reputation in Bingzhou, so he will surely pacify the people and stabilize the area. Moreover, there are our relatives and friends there, which can also provide soldiers with a peaceful home. After hearing this, Lv Bu remained silent, fully aware that what Zhang Liao said was reasonable, but he always felt that there were other better options in his heart. He looked at Gao Shun, a silent general who had always been his most trusted comrade in arms. Gao Shun understood and said in a low voice, Lord, I think we can also consider joining other forces. With the chaos in the world and the rise of local powers, if we can find a person with aspirations, perhaps we can make some progress. But the risk is also high, Liu Bu sighed. Who knows if those forces are trustworthy? So it's up to you, my lord, to make a decision, Zhang Liao said. But no matter which path you choose, we will follow you until the very last moment. Upon hearing this, Liu Bu was deeply moved. I know that these two close friends in arms, no matter when or where, will stand firmly by his side. And he also needs to make a decision as soon as possible to lead them towards a bright future. Liu Bu looked deeply at Zhang Liao and Gao Shun, and said in a deep voice, I think we should go to Xiliang. Gao Shun was taken aback and then asked, Xiliang. Why? Liu Bu took a deep breath and said, the Western Liang forces are scattered, and the biggest force is Dong Zhuo, who controls most of the area. Next are Ma Tang and Han Sui, each occupying one side. Finally, there is the Yan family. Although their influence is small, they are located in a dangerous area and cannot be underestimated. Zhang Liao frowned slightly and said, although Dong Zhuo has the greatest influence, his control over Xiliang has weakened in recent years due to the erosion of Luoyang's prosperity and status. Liu Bu nodded and said, not bad. Dong Zhuo has shifted his focus to the struggle for dominance in the Central Plains, and his control over the Western Liang is no longer as good as before. Although Ma Tang and Han Sui are in alliance with each other, their relationship seems to be strained and constrained. A glimmer of light flashed in Gao Shun's eyes and he said, so, if we can make good use of these contradictions, perhaps we can stand firm in Xiliang. Liu Bu tilted his lips slightly and said, that's right. Moreover, Xiliang is located on the border, which has a certain buffering effect on the wars in the Central Plains. If we can establish ourselves there, advance can attack, and retreat can defend, it will be extremely beneficial for our long-term development. The dim yellow light flickered and reflected on Liu Bu's face, his brows filled with determination and anxiety. He looked at Zhang Liao next to him and said in a deep voice, Zhang Liao, I'll tell you to write it down on Kai Ho's paper later. Zhang Liao nodded and said, "Okay, I'll tell you first." Lu Bu took a deep breath and said, "When Yuan, you right, Wang Situ, Mengde has a plan." When rumors spread, Ma Tengen prepared to serve as the king, but the two of them separated from Lu Dong and pretended to offer advice. Zhang Ji was the main general, while Zhang Liao, Gao Shun, Su Huang, Wei Su, Song Xian, and Ho became the supplementary guards of Qinsong to prevent Ma Tengen from acting. They instigated the relationship between Hu Zhen, Niupu, and Lu Bu. Zhang Liao was stunned and blurted out, "Ah, what will you do if we leave?" Lu Bu's face was firm as he said, "It's okay, there are also Wei Yu and Cheng Lian and the four of them. By the way, when Yuan and Bo Jing, when you arrive at Qinsong, you will establish a good relationship with Zhang Ji's nephew Zhang Xiu. Bo Jing's task is to establish a good relationship with Su Huang. Also, let Wei Su and Song Xian collect more intelligence about Ma Teng and Han Sui during their stay in Qinsong, and have the opportunity to have Zhang Ji send troops to attack Wudu County." The three of them looked at each other with a smile, and they all had a decision in their hearts. Lv Bu's proposal was approved by Zhang Liao and Gao Shun. In the future, we will survive and develop in Xiliang, a land full of challenges and opportunities. General Lu Bu, Zhang Liao, and Gao Shun left the camp, each carrying their own mission to carry out their responsibilities as military commanders. Looking for Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com, Lu Bu's eyes flickered with determination. He wanted to go to Haomengcao's training ground to check the training of the soldiers. Lu Bu's steps were firm and powerful, his gaze sharp like an eagle, looking straight ahead. Knowing that every decision and action of oneself may affect the morale and combat effectiveness of the entire army. Therefore, one must act with caution, lead by example, and demonstrate a sense of care and responsibility toward soldiers. Upon arriving at Haomeng in Chao Xing's training ground, Lv Bu glanced over and saw the soldiers energetic and well-trained one by one. Their movements were neat and uniform, and their cries were earth-shattering. Lu Bu nodded with satisfaction, knowing that these soldiers were ready to face any challenge. Walking in front of Haomeng in Chao Xing, I couldn't help but feel a little moved as I watched them sweating profusely and panting heavily. He knew that the success of these soldiers today was inseparable from the hard work and strict training of generals such as Haomeng in Chao Xing. "What's the situation with the soldiers?" The voice was deep and powerful, full of concern for the soldiers. Upon hearing this, Haomeng and Chao Xing looked up at Lu Bu with a look of joy and admiration on their faces. They knew that Lu Bu's questioning was not an empty formalism, but a genuine concern and responsibility. Speaking to the general, Haomeng and Chao Xing replied in unison, "The soldiers' training has made significant progress, and their combat effectiveness and morale are constantly improving." Lu Bu nodded satisfactorily and said, "Very good. We must always remember that our responsibility is not only to fight, but also to protect the safety of every soldier's life." Lu Bu knew that in this era of war, only those who had truly fought on the battlefield knew the value of life and the fear of death. Chapter 3. The Present Home. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push Lv Bu, quietly watching everything in front of you. His eyes were filled with determination and reluctance. This was the place where the true Lu Bu led his troops for training and fought alongside his comrades. However, now I have to return to my own home. Lv Mansion. Lu Bu stepped onto the red hare horse and looked around the military camp for the last time, a place that witnessed countless glories and hardships. Then, lightly pinching the horse's belly, he drove towards the distant Lv Mansion. The door of Lv Mansion slowly opened, and Lv Bu's wife Yan Shui and daughter Lv Lingqi appeared at the door. Lu Bu looked at them and a warm current surged in his heart. Although I have spent most of these days in the military camp, home has always been the warmest harbor. Yan Shui smiled and welcomed Lu Bu, her eyes filled with longing and pride for her husband. Lu Lingqi rushed over and threw herself into Lu Bu's arms. Lu Bu smiled and picked up his daughter, his heart filled with tenderness. Upon returning home, Lu Bu shed the general's authority and became an ordinary husband and father. Accompanying my wife and daughter for a walk in the garden, watching them laughing and laughing, my heart was filled with tranquility and satisfaction. I know that no matter how much wind and rain I have experienced in the military camp, home is always my safe haven. As night fell, Lu Bu sat in the yard, watching the stars fill the sky. Looking up at the sky, as if lost in thought. "General Zhang is waiting for you in the main hall," a servant whispered. Lu Bu slowly lowered his gaze and the corner of his mouth moved slightly. "Got it, let's go, lead the way." Although his voice was plain, it had a calm and majestic aura. The attendant responded and led Lv Bu towards the main hall. Lu Bu's pace was neither tight nor slow, as if time had come to a halt in front of him. Only the sound of his steady steps echoed in the air, as if telling his story. "General Zhang has been waiting for a long time in the main hall." Seeing Lu Bu arrive, he quickly stood up to greet him. "The letter has been handed over to Wang Situ, and Fengxian still maintains his charm." Zhang Wenyuan arched his hand. Lu Bu smiled slightly and said, "Wenyuan is too much of a compliment. Please take a seat." He also sat down in the main seat. After the two exchanged pleasantries, the topic gradually got to the main point. When Zhang Liao talked about the Central Plains, Lv Bu frowned upon hearing it. "I am well aware that this is not just an ordinary conflict in the Central Plains, but also involves the competition and game of various forces behind it." The two discussed for a long time and finally decided on a strategy. Lu Bu knew in his heart that the road ahead would be even more difficult. "I will personally handle this matter, Wenyuan, please rest assured," he said lightly without revealing it. After seeing off Zhang Liao, Lv Bu returned to the courtyard and looked up at the sky. At that moment, there was a steadfast gleam in my eyes, as if saying, "No matter how difficult the road ahead may be, I, Lu Bu, will definitely move forward without hesitation." "General, what's General Wenyuan looking for you for?" Yan Shui approached Lu Bu and asked softly, her eyes filled with concern. Lu Bu frowned slightly and said, "It's nothing, just some military affairs. You go rest first." Yan Shui nodded, but did not leave immediately. Her intuition told her that this night would never be so peaceful. Although Lu Bu had signaled her to leave multiple times, she still stood there with a firm gaze. As night fell, Lu Bu stood by the window of his study, gazing at the sunset outside. "My heart is filled with worries. Military affairs, this is just a superficial excuse." Yan Shui knew that General Zhang Liao's late-night visit to find his husband was not a simple military matter. Their conversation, although only a few words, already foreshadowed an impending storm. Yan Shui stood quietly at the door of the study, her heart racing with Lu Bu's silence. She could feel that something big would happen this spring. And both she and Lu Bu will be in it, unable to escape. The night deepened, and the lights of Lv Mansion remained bright. Yan Shui stood silently at the door of her study, her heart filled with determination. No matter what difficulties and challenges lie ahead, she will accompany Lu Bu and face them together. On this spring night, the lights of Lv Mansion sway in the spring breeze. And the story of Yan Shui and Lv Bu quietly unfolds in this spring. The morning in Chang'an is shrouded in mist, like a fairyland. In the Lv Mansion, Lv Bu had already stood up and arrived at the courtyard, holding the familiar Fengtian painting halberd in his hand. Facing the breeze, he began a day of practice. The halberd technique is sharp and precise, with each strike full of power and rhythm. 15 minutes have passed, and Lu Bu is still focused on practicing. Yan Shui walked gently to Lu Bu's side, wearing a thick cloak and a graceful expression on her face. "General, you've been practicing for an hour now, why don't you take a break?" she said softly. Lu Bu stopped and looked at Yan Shui with a smile, saying, "Okay, Shui." You go back first, it's cold outside. His voice was gentle and indulgent. Yan Shui nodded and walked into the mansion. Lv looked at her back with tenderness in his heart. I know that this woman is now the most important presence in my life and I am willing to give everything for her. In Lu Bu's heart, Chang'an is not only his own home, but also his responsibility. As a general of the Han dynasty, I vow to protect this city and its people. Despite the gentle breeze piercing his bones, Lu Bu's heart was burning with a blazing flame. Knowing that only through continuous practice can one maintain their best state and better fulfill their responsibilities. As the sunrise shone on the earth, Lv waved the Fengtian painting halberd once again. The figure appeared even taller and more majestic in the sunlight, and his gaze was firm and sharp. Zhaoshuyuan.com. The servants hurried through the corridor, breaking the original tranquility. Suddenly, there was a commotion in the direction of the stable, and Lu Bu was ready to walk towards the stable with a deep gaze. General, the Grand Tutor has summoned you to the palace for discussion. The servant knelt in front of Lu Bu, with a hint of awe in his tone. Lv nodded slightly, with a hint of doubt flashing in his eyes. Dong Zhuo, what kind of trick is this powerful old man playing? Lv arrived at the stable and flipped over to get on his horse. The red rabbit horse seemed to feel the emotions of its owner, with a gust of wind blowing under its hooves. It galloped all the way from Lv stable to Chang'an Street. The people saw everyone giving way and whispering to each other. Lv knew well that he was now seen as an unforgivable person in the eyes of the people, but behind Dong Zhuo's orders, there were some conspiracies and schemes hidden. The palace gate stands tall in front, towering into the clouds. Lv restrained the reins, and the red rabbit and horse hissed and stopped at the city gate. He lightly patted the horse's back, handed over the red rabbit horse to the guard, and then strode into the palace. Inside the palace, it is magnificent and magnificent. Lu Bu walked through long corridors and couldn't help but marvel at this fortress of power. What exactly is Dong Zhuo planning? He took a deep breath and walked towards the conference hall. At the moment when Lu Bu stepped into the conference hall, all his gaze was focused on himself. Dong Zhuo stood by the dragon chair, with a sly smile on his face. Lu Bu's heart sank, knowing that the next thing might not be so simple. Fengxian, you're here. Go back to your position. Dong Zhuo's voice carried an unquestionable dignity. Lv nodded slightly and sat on the side of the conference hall. Observing the crowd calmly, my heart was already prepared for everything. The air inside the conference hall seemed to freeze, and everyone's gaze wandered back and forth between Lv and Dong Zhuo. A battle about the fate of Chang'an City is about to unfold. Chapter 4. Encountering Assassination. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, Chang'an City, which has been the center of the Chinese Empire since ancient times, is now shrouded in a shadow of anxiety. The atmosphere inside the palace was oppressive and heavy, as if even the air was filled with the smell of gunpowder. Dong Zhuo, who once held great power and ruled the empire, is now standing beside Emperor Xian of Han on his magnificent throne, with a furrowed brow. Glancing sharply at His Highness's courtiers, he spoke, although the Canto rebels such as Yuan Shao, Yuan Shu, and Cao Cao have temporarily disbanded, their ambitions have never disappeared. We must come up with countermeasures. Guo Si stepped forward and loudly said, let me lead the army to eliminate them and completely eliminate the future troubles. Dong Zhuo sneered disdainfully, fool, do you think war is just a child's play? His voice was filled with dignity and anger. Li Ru, the strategist who always wears a smile, also spoke up at this moment. I have a plan. I can try to give officials a try, such as Yuan Shao being appointed as the governor of Yizhou. Yuan Shao will definitely find a way to occupy Han Fu's Yizhou, and Yuan Shu, Cao Cao, and others will do the same. Let officials from different regions balance each other and compete with each other. This way, they won't be able to form an alliance to resist you, Grand Tutor. Dong Zhuo's eyes flashed with a hint of admiration. That's a good idea. At this moment, prisoner Wu stood up with a pale face but a firm tone. Grand Tutor, I have a treasure to offer to you. Dong Zhuo became interested and walked up to prisoner Wu. Oh. What treasure? However, prisoner Wu suddenly drew a short knife from his arms and stabbed Dong Zhuo directly. This incident came too quickly, and everyone was stunned. But Yang Ding reacted quickly and stood in front of Dong Zhuo, slapping the prisoner of war back. The palace was in chaos, and the guards rushed forward to subdue the prisoners of war. Dong Zhuo looked at Yang Ding lying on the ground, his eyes full of gratitude. You saved my life, what reward do you have? But Yang Ding just smiled faintly and said, it's only right for the sake of the Grand Tutor, but Grand Tutor, you still need to be careful. A figure was dragged in front of Dong Zhuo, who was a middle-aged general's prisoner of war, with a face full of perseverance and determination. Dong Zhuo stared at him in anger and said, damn it, I want your whole family to die. Tell me, who sent you here? Without fear, the prisoner of war swallowed a mouthful of blood and spat it directly on Dong Zhuo's face, saying, no one else is needed. It is everyone's responsibility to kill you, a national thief. Evil thieves, rebels, and treacherous officials, you must die hard. Dong, you will go to 18 layers of hell. Dong Zhuo was shocked by the courage of the captured Wu and turned to the Emperor Lu Xie sitting on the throne, saying, I request your Majesty's order to execute this thief. Lu Xie sat there, his body trembling slightly. I know that this decision may bring unpredictable consequences, but there is no room for choice. Hard-faced, he said, just follow the instructions of Grand Tutorin. Dong Zhuo smiled contentedly and waved his hand, someone, suppress this thief. However, the prisoners of war did not surrender. At the last moment of his life, he still firmly believed in himself. National thief, evil thief, you must die hard. You go and copy the home of the thief, Captain Wu, Dong Zhuo said to the ox, his voice as cold as iron. Niopu's body trembled, without any hesitation, and he quickly followed the sound and left. Dong Zhuo watched as the cow shop left, with a deep light flashing in his eyes. Turning his head, he looked at the strategist Li Ru beside him and said in a deep voice, Wen Yu, what else do you need to do? After pondering for a moment, Li Ru slowly spoke up and said, please send General Fan to Wuguan to defend Yuan Shu, Duan Xian to guard Tongguan, and then send someone to Xiliang to transfer the relationship between Ma Tang and Han Sui. Dong Zhuo nodded slightly, expressing satisfaction. I am clear in my heart that these arrangements are all meant to cope with the upcoming chaos. In this ever-changing era, only by mastering absolute power can one stand invincible. However, the situation within Chang'an City is not stable. Although Dong Zhuo held great power, his violent rule also caused numerous dissatisfaction and resistance. At this time, the appearance of prisoners of war undoubtedly became a thorn in Dong Zhuo's side. At this moment, a conspiracy against Dong Zhuo is brewing in Chang'an City. Various forces are secretly planning to overthrow Dong Zhuo's rule in one fell swoop. The once bustling land is now shrouded in a solemn atmosphere. Lu Bu is currently riding a red rabbit horse, crossing the streets of Chang'an City. The destination is LV Mansion. I just finished discussing national affairs in the palace and am now about to return to my own residence. On both sides of the streets in Chang'an City, pedestrians have long disappeared, leaving only a dead silence. Only the sound of Lu Bu's horse hooves echoed in this tranquility. I felt a faint unease in my heart, but I didn't delve deeper. Suddenly, several black shadows emerged from the darkness around them, straight at Lu Bu. These masked people hold sharp blades and move quickly, clearly trained assassins. Lu Bu's eyes stiffened and he immediately understood that these people were coming towards him. In the midst of the carbide fire, LV Bu had pulled out his 7-star sword from his waist and met the attacking masked man. The red rabbit and horse hissed and seemed to feel the owner's anger. A fierce battle ensued. Above the restaurant, one person drinks alone. Staring intently at the battle below, a faint light flashed in his eyes. Although LV Bu was brave and invincible, he had a large number of masked people and cooperated well, which led him into a difficult battle. However, Lu Bu did not panic and gradually regained his disadvantage with his exceptional martial arts skills and battlefield experience. The leader of the masked man saw something wrong and shouted loudly, "Let's go together, kill him." With the order, the masked people launched an even more fierce attack. However, at this moment, the person above the restaurant suddenly stood up, took out a hidden weapon from his pocket, and fiercely threw it at the masked leader. The hidden weapon accurately hit the target, and the leader of Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com fell to the ground in response. The masked man who had lost his leader was immediately in chaos, and his offensive was greatly reduced. Lu Bu took the opportunity to shout loudly and swung his sword to break through the enemy's encirclement. He flipped over onto the red rabbit horse and galloped away. The remaining masked people, disregarding the leader's life or death, scattered and fled. The people in the restaurant looked at the back of Lu Bu as he left, with a smile on their lips. I didn't rush to leave, but continued to savor the fine wine in my hand, as if waiting for something. Escaping the assassination, Lu Bu rode a red rabbit horse and embarked on the journey home. But his heart was filled with doubts and curiosity. Who was that mysterious person? Why would you lend a helping hand at a critical moment? Lu Bu recalled the scene in the battle, where the mysterious man's hidden weapon technique was fast, accurate, and ruthless, and he seemed to know everything about this assassination. His one shot hit the leader in black, just right, saving himself without letting the enemy notice. Such an expert has never been seen in Lu Bu's life. On the way home, Lu Bu couldn't help but imagine the identity of that mysterious person. He may be a martial arts master living in seclusion in the mountains or a secret warrior of a high-ranking official in the court. Perhaps he has a more mysterious identity and purpose. Thinking of this, Lu Bu became even more determined in his heart to find the mysterious person. He was well aware that although his martial arts were high, he appeared so vulnerable in front of that mysterious person. He yearns to learn more martial arts to better protect his family and ambitions. Lu Bu finally rode a red rabbit horse to the vicinity of his home. The situation in Chang'an City is unpredictable, and an assassination incident has further complicated the situation. Make Dong Zhuo, loyal ministers, and LV Bu's actions even more chaotic, and constantly engage in power struggles in this game. Who can stand firm in this storm? What will be the fate of Chang'an City? All of these answers are hidden in the fog of the future. Chapter 5. Dong Zhuo's Visit. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, as night falls, a solemn aura fills the air. Lu Bu, who was on the red rabbit's horse, was covered in bloodstains and returned dusty. His eyes revealed fatigue and determination, as if he had experienced a battle on the front line of life and death. Yan Shui, the hostess of LV Mansion, changed her face when she saw her husband return. She quickly called out to the maids beside her, "Hurry up, go call the doctor." Then she stepped forward and helped her husband who had come down from the horse. "General, what's wrong with you?" Yan Shui asked nervously, "Why is your whole body covered in blood?" Lu Bu didn't answer immediately, just shook his head wearily. Looking up at the plaque on the mansion, a hint of warmth flashed in my eyes. "I'm fine, it's all enemy blood, Shui, you don't have to worry." The doctor hurried over to diagnose and treat LV Bu. Yan Shui stood guard on the side, with mixed feelings in her heart. She knew the general was a brave person, but seeing her husband come home with blood still made her feel extremely nervous. In a tense atmosphere, the family members of LV Mansion also rushed over one after another. They gathered around Lu Bu, inquiring about the situation with concern. And Lu Bu just smiled faintly, telling them that he was not in any big deal. It was late at night, and the doctor bandaged Lv Bu's wound and instructed him to rest well. Yan Shui personally served her husband and lay down, feeling 1,000 emotions in her heart. She understood that this family needed her husband's strength and his safety. On that night, there were also people secretly observing everything in the Lv mansion in the Chang'an Palace. They each had their own plans in their hearts, but they remained silent about the Lu Bu who came home with blood. As the night deepened, the lights in Chang'an Palace gradually went out. In the Lv mansion, only one room was still dimly lit. That is Lu Bu's bedroom, and Yan Shui is still guarding the bedside, silently praying for her husband's early recovery. And in her heart, she also knew that this family needed a strong pillar. Only when the husband is safe and sound can this family continue to maintain a peaceful life. As the sun rises, the hustle and bustle of Chang'an City has not yet fully awakened. Dong Zhuo, a high-ranking official who held real power in the court, was not present in the court today because he received news that Lv Bu, his capable arm, had also been assassinated. Dong Zhuo was extremely anxious and immediately rode his horse to Lu Bu's mansion. Filled with doubts and worries, Lu Bu's safety is directly related to his ruling position. The gate of Lu Bu's mansion was tightly closed, and Dong Zhuo urgently tapped the doorbell, his voice echoing in the early morning of Chang'an City. Soon, the door slowly opened and the butler personally welcomed it out. "Fengxian, my son, what's going on? How could you have been assassinated?" Dong Zhuo urgently asked as he approached the bed. Lu Bu smiled faintly and said, "Grand Tutor, I'm fine. This is just a small assassination attempt." Dong Zhuo breathed a sigh of relief and said, "This is home, not the palace. Just call me my adoptive father," with a hypocritical tone. "My adoptive father," Lu Bu responded with a hint of imperceptible coldness in his eyes. As the two entered the mansion, Dong Zhuo asked with concern, "What are your plans? Do you need me to do anything?" Lu Bu remained silent for a moment. "I need to know the mastermind behind it." "I will send someone to investigate," Dong Zhuo said. "You must be careful and pay attention to safety. This is an emergency period, and there are many villains trying to harm us." Lv Bu nodded and said, "My adoptive father, I will. However, if I really encounter something unexpected, you also need to be prepared." Dong Zhuo was taken aback and understood what Lv Bu meant. Dong Zhuo knew that Lv Bu would leave the Lv mansion if he had nothing to do. Dong Zhuo had just left when Lv Bu got up from the bed, his eyes shining with determination. He put on his coat and hurriedly left the mansion, heading straight for the military camp. Lv Bu walked into the tent, and Zhang Liao, Gao Shun, Wei Su, and others were already waiting. They saw Lu Bu come in and immediately stood up to greet him. "General, are you okay?" Zhang Liao asked with concern. Lu Bu nodded and said, "I'm fine. Dong Zhuo has just come, so he must just be testing my attitude." Gao Shun said with concern, "General, the situation is tense now, and the Western Liang army is watching closely. We cannot take it lightly." Wei Su agreed and said, "Yes, General, we must be careful when dealing with it." Lu Bu said in a deep voice, "I know. Dong Zhuo's visit this time is nothing more than a test of my strength. Although Dong Zhuo has the support of the Western Liang army, as long as we remain calm and do not engage in direct conflict with Dong Zhuo, he cannot do anything to us." Lu Bu asked, "What is the situation with the soldiers?" Zhang Liao replied, "The soldiers have high morale, but we must ensure that they do not conflict with the Western Liang army. I will order them to remain vigilant and not act recklessly." Lu Bu said, "Okay, Zhang Liao, Gao Shun, please continue to pacify your brothers." Everyone responded in unison. Lu Bu looked at them and a warm current surged in his heart. In this chaotic world, accompanied by these loyal soldiers, why worry about not achieving great things? Lv Bu left the military camp and returned to the city, wandering through the streets. The sunlight slanted on the streets of Chang'an City, casting a golden glow on the entire city. Lu Bu strolled through this bustling street market, searching for a book garden www.zhaozhuan.com to enjoy rare leisure time. Suddenly, a commotion caught his attention. He looked up and saw a middle-aged man dressed in school captain attire and a young man conversing with a group of people in front of a hotel. The colonel, Lu Bu, felt somewhat familiar with his face, but couldn't recall where he had seen him before. Approaching closer, I found that the colonel was actually Zhang Ji, and the young man was his nephew Zhang Xiu. Zhang Ji's face was full of worry, while Zhang Xiu's face was full of indignation. Lu Bu knew in his heart that this was a good opportunity to get close to Zhang Ji's uncle and nephew, so he walked into the hotel and sat at the table next to them, smiling and nodding to Zhang Ji. Zhang Ji saw Lu Bu and a hint of surprise flashed on his face, followed by a grateful smile. "It's General LV, please take a seat." Lu Bu smiled slightly and nodded. After greeting Zhang Xiu, he asked, "Captain Zhang, you look worried. Is there anything bothering you?" Zhang Ji sighed and told LV Bu about the situation in Chang'an City and their plight. Originally, due to years of war, the public security in Chang'an City has been deteriorating, and the people are suffering unbearably. As a colonel, Zhang Ji cannot guarantee the safety of the people in the city. After listening, LV Bu pondered for a moment and said, "It's not easy for Captain Zhang to ask for help from the people. I will do my best to help you." Upon hearing these words, Zhang Xiu's eyes flashed with a hint of gratitude. "I thank General LV on behalf of my uncle." From then on, LV Bu often came to this hotel to chat with Zhang Ji and Zhang Xiu. Their topics range from the current situation in war to various aspects of life, covering everything. During this conversation, Lu Bu not only learned more about the affairs of Chang'an City, but also gained a deeper understanding of human relationships and worldly wisdom. As time passed, their relationship became increasingly intimate. The situation in Chang'an City is also quietly changing. Chapter 6. Military Competition. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. In the early morning of Chang'an Street, a gentle breeze blows and the sunlight falls on the bluestone slabs, as if casting a layer of golden veil over this ancient city. Lu Bu, at this moment, was slowly walking along this familiar street with his wife Yan Shui, enjoying a rare leisure time. They are like glue, with extraordinary love. LV Bu is unparalleled in bravery. Although he is as fierce as a tiger on the battlefield, he is just a gentle husband in front of Yan Shui. And Yan Shui, with outstanding talent, coexists with wisdom and beauty. Every smile from her fills Lu Bu's heart with warmth. Just as the two were immersed in this peaceful moment, a loud noise caught their attention. A crowd surrounded the area, and curiosity drove them over to take a closer look. Originally, there was a strong man in the crowd selling himself to bury his father. His voice choked up, tears flowed down, but he still straightened his spine and faced the difficulties of life. Yan Shui looked at everything in front of her, with mixed feelings in her heart. She walked forward and softly asked the strong man about his predicament. The strong man looked at her, his eyes filled with surprise and gratitude. Originally, his father passed away unexpectedly, but the family was unable to afford the funeral expenses. Helpless, he could only choose to sell himself to bury his father. Yan Shui remained silent for a moment before turning to Lu Bu and saying, "General, I want to help him." Lu Bu looked at her with tenderness and understanding in his eyes. Nod gently to show support for her decision. So, Lu Bu began to allocate funds to help the strong man complete his funeral. Lu Bu returned home with his wife today, filled with joy. Gently pushing the door open, as if pushing away the storms of history. The silence inside the room was broken, and he waved his hand to signal his wife to go back to the bedroom to rest. In the main hall, LV Bu stood alone with sharp eyes. At this moment, a strong man stepped into the main hall, with a burly figure and muscles as hard as iron and stone. Lv approached and asked in a low voice, "What's your name?" The strong man lowered his head and said in a low voice, "Master, my name is Huchayer." Lv was taken aback and didn't expect that he had truly gained the status of a strongman in history on a whim. His thoughts quickly turned and he said, "Huchayer, from today on, you will be my personal commander." Huchayer looked up, a hint of surprise flashed in his eyes, and then he firmly said, "I take command." Lv turned around and ordered, "Someone, please place a bedroom for Hu Tongling." A servant rushed in and left. Lubu looked at Huchayer and said, "Hu Tongling, please follow him to rest and wash up first." Huchayer nodded and said, "I understand." Lubu watched as Huchayer left, his excitement and expectations surging like a tide in his heart. "Take a deep breath and turn towards the master bedroom." Yan Shui sat by the bed, and Lv walked over and gently grasped her hand, saying, "Thank you." Yan Shui smiled slightly and said, "We are husband and wife, why be polite?" Lubu nodded, his heart filled with emotion. He knew that from now on, they would face more ups and downs side by side. Lv stood by the window, gazing into the distance. "I know that a new journey is about to begin, and this time, I will face the challenges of the future with stronger determination and strength." After enjoying lunch, Lv left the Lv mansion with Huchayer and walked towards the direction of the military camp. Huchayer, this strong man whom Lv is proud of, is about to showcase his strength in front of everyone. Lv led Huchayer to the military camp, searching for Zhang Liao, Gao Shun, and others. With a firm gaze and a confident tone, "When Yuan Wajing, let me introduce you to Huchayer. He is a strong man." Ho Ching looked at Huchayer with a look of disbelief on his face and said, "General, are you joking?" Huchayer, expressionless and with a deep voice, said, "Is that right? Just give it a try and you'll know. Come, come." Ho Ching showed no weakness and walked towards the campus with Huchayer. People in the military camp gathered around one after another, knowing that the strongman brought by Lv was by no means an ordinary person. A wonderful competition is about to unfold, which is not only a collision of strength, but also a competition of courage. Huchayer and Ho Ching stood in opposition in the center of the school field, and the atmosphere instantly became tense. Lubu looked at them with a smile on his face, knowing that this battle would bring new vitality to the military. Huchayer and Ho Ching began to engage in combat, their movements swift and powerful. Huchayer, with her astonishing strength and skills, repeatedly pushed Ho Ching into a desperate situation. And Ho Ching was also unwilling to be outdone, using his courage and perseverance to resist Huchayer's fierce attack. Their duel sparked cheers and shouts from everyone, and they were all looking forward to the outcome of this battle. Lubu looked at them with anticipation in his heart. Believe it, whether it's Huchayer or Ho Ching, they are all capable generals under his command. After a fierce battle, Huchayer finally defeated Ho Ching. Huchayer's victory was not only due to his strength, but also because of his courage and perseverance. Although Ho Ching failed, he also showed indomitable fighting spirit. Lubu looked at them with a satisfied smile on his face. "I know that with generals like Huchayer and Ho Ching, his army will become even stronger. And this battle will also become a timeless tale in the military." In the long yellow sand military camp, war drums rumble and flags flutter. Lv Buzheng had a conversation with his subordinates Ho Ching, Wei Su, Wei Yu, and others. Lubu's gaze turned to Huchayer, a burly and muscular man on the side. "How about it, Ho Ching, is this strongman very outstanding?" Lubu asked with a hint of pride on his face. Ho Ching widened his eyes and looked at Huchayer with some surprise. "General, where did you find this person from?" His voice was filled with admiration and curiosity. Wei Su also leaned over with a curious expression on his face. "Brother-in-law, where did this Huchayer come from?" Lubu smiled mysteriously and said, "Then I have to ask your cousin." "Cousin?" Wei Yu looked puzzled. Zhaozhuiyuan.com. Alright, don't interrupt, Lu Bu interrupted their question. Let's go to camp first. I have something to say. His tone was serious, making it impossible for anyone to be negligent. Everyone followed Lu Bu towards the camp, but their hearts were filled with doubts and curiosity. And Hu Chaer, this mysterious hero, also left a deep impression in their hearts. Night falls inside the military camp. Lu Bu sat in the tent, facing the crowd with a hint of imperceptible concern on his face. He is well aware that the cruelty and uncertainty of war make the strength of every soldier crucial. The appearance of Hu Chaer undoubtedly added a powerful force to his army. Hu Chaer is indeed a rare talent, Lu Bu said. Has the letter been handed over to Wang Situ? Lu Bu looked at Zhang Liao with a firm gaze. Zhang Liao nodded and said, let Zhang Jie have already handed it over to Wang Situ. Lu Bu took a deep breath and said, okay, now is the time to wait. Suddenly, the cook came running panting and said, General, we're running out of food. Lu Bu frowned and said, what? Didn't the Grand Tutor send someone to deliver food? Song Xiandao said, no one came to deliver food. Lv Bu pondered for a moment, then came up with a plan. Pretending to remain calm, he said, Wei Su and Song Xian, go ahead and purchase grain first. Remember, don't speak up. The two of them followed orders and left. Lv Bu turned to Hu Chaer and said, you go back to the LV mansion to guard and prevent any unexpected situations. Hu Chaer nodded and quickly left the military camp. Lu Bu looked at the generals and thought to himself, has the strategy started? After speaking, Lv Bu stood up, left the military camp, and walked towards the direction of the Taisher mansion. As night fell, the lights of the military camp flickered behind, and Lu Bu's back appeared particularly lonely. Chapter 7. Transport of Grain. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, Lu Bu, riding a tall horse, slowly arrived at the gate of the Grand Tutor's mansion. His appearance immediately alerted the gatekeeper, who tightly grasped the weapon and asked, General Lv, what can I do for you? Lu Bu calmly replied, I have something to ask my adoptive father for. Is he there? The gatekeeper dared not neglect and replied, please wait a moment, I will report to the homeowner. Lv Bu waited outside the door for a few minutes, as if time had slowed down his pace. The gatekeeper returned and said, General, the master is waiting for you in the main hall. General, come with me. Lv Bu nodded and replied, okay, thank you, Manager Dong. Then he followed the butler into the mansion. Grand Tutor Dong Zhuo sat on a tiger leather chair in the main hall, his eyes deep. Upon seeing Lu Bu come in, Dong Zhuo knew that he was looking for him because of the provisions, but pretended not to know why Lu Bu was looking for him. He opened the door and asked straightforwardly, first of all, how is the progress of the provisions? Lu Bu frowned and said, my adoptive father, as far as I know, the provisions for the Bingzhou soldiers are not ready yet. Dong Zhuo looked displeased and said, didn't I let Guosi handle it? Haven't it been delivered yet? Lu Bu replied, it seems that the situation is still in preparation. I'll go ask Guosi. Dong Zhuo waved his hand and said, do you want to bother me with such a small matter? You go. Lu Bu agreed. With a promise, he turned around and left the Taisher mansion. The lights of Chang'an city gradually lit up. Lv Bu rode his horse through the bustling Chang'an market and raced towards the direction of the Xiliang military camp. My heart is filled with anxiety and anticipation. Anxiety is due to fear that Dong Zhuo will see through his plan, while anticipation is due to the success of a part of his plan. Under the cover of night, Lu Bu arrived at the Xiliang military camp. Lu Bu approached Guosi and asked, Guosi, why hasn't the food and supplies for the Bingzhou soldiers been delivered yet? Guosi showed an awkward expression and said, General Lu, things are not going smoothly. Due to transportation delays, the food and supplies may have to wait a few more days to be delivered. Lv couldn't help but frown and said, "Wait a few more days. That's not possible. We must solve this problem as soon as possible." The two discussed for a moment and decided that Lv would personally lead a team of elite soldiers to escort food and supplies to the Bingzhou army camp. As the night deepened, the lights in Chang'an City flickered behind them. Lu Bu flipped over and mounted his horse, shouting to the soldiers behind him, "Let's go." The sound echoed in the night sky, as if heralding the beginning of a great war. Under the cover of night, Lu Bu and his group quietly left the Xiliang military camp. Their destination is the Bingzhou army camp, where unknown challenges and difficult tests await them. However, for Lu Bu, as long as he can ensure the smooth delivery of food and supplies, all difficulties are not to be feared. On this pitch-black night, the outline of Chang'an City gradually disappeared from sight. And Lu Bu and the food delivery team finally arrived at the military camp. In the military camp, a heavy atmosphere envelopes every corner. The soldiers had a solemn expression and their eyes were full of vigilance. Qing Lian and Wei Yu come out to move provisions. A loud and firm voice broke the silence. The master of the voice was none other than Lu Bu, whose sharp eyes were as sharp as a knife, making people feel intimidated. Qing Lian and Wei Yu were two confidants under Lu Bu's command. Upon hearing the call, they immediately put down their belongings and headed towards the grain and grass stacks. Despite their tired faces, the firmness and loyalty in their eyes remained undiminished. The stacks of grain and grass pile up like mountains, like a yellow ocean. Under the faint moonlight, Qing Lian and Wei Yu began to transport grain and grass. Their movements may not be fast, but they are orderly, as if they are undergoing a silent ceremony. Why didn't General Song Xian and his men come to move the provisions? Qing Lian asked in a low voice as he moved the provisions. Wei Yu let out a bitter smile and said, "You don't know that others either go out of the city to patrol or have tasks to do like when Yuan. And the Lord is doing this just to train us." Qing Lian nodded without saying anything more. They all know that in this turbulent era, only through repeated trials and tribulations can one become a true warrior. General Lu Bu strictly demands every soldier based on this principle. The night gradually deepened, but the lights in the military camp remained bright. The figures of Qing Lian and Wei Yu shuttle between the grain stacks, and their figures appear particularly resilient in the faint moonlight. For them, this night may just be an interlude in their long military career. In the darkness, Lu Bu, who had just finished moving provisions from the military camp, looked tired and said to Qing Lian and Wei Yu beside him, "You go rest." His tone carried an undeniable dignity. Qing Lian and Wei Yu, after listening to Lv Bu's words, immediately went to rest. And Lv Bu himself also left the military camp and embarked on the road home. Chang'an under the moonlight, with dim lights. Lu Bu rode a red rabbit horse and walked on the wide street. His shadow stretched long on the cobblestone road, like a lonely wolf. Chang'an in the night, without the hustle and bustle of the day, has gained a sense of tranquility in depth. The shops on both sides of the street have already closed, with only a few scattered pedestrians rushing by. Lu Bu's red rabbit horse stands out particularly on the empty street, its hooves echoing in the quiet night, as if telling something. Lu Bu looked up and looked at his home in the distance at the book garden www.zhaozhuiyuan.com, where there were his relatives. So, Lu Bu rode a red rabbit horse and walked in the night of Chang'an. His figure gradually disappeared into the distance, leaving only the melodious sound of horse hooves echoing in the night sky. Lu Bu has just arrived at Lu Fu. And when Hu Chai'er saw Lu Bu, he immediately asked his personal soldiers to open the door. Lu Bu nodded as he watched Hu Chai'er go straight to the stable, dismounted, and headed straight to the bedroom. Although the bedroom was not large, it was full of warmth. Pushing open the door, I saw my wife Yan Shui sewing clothes under the lamp, and my daughter Lv Lingqi reading a book attentively. Lu Bu smiled slightly, and a warm current surged in his heart. Walking over, she gently hugged Yan Shui and Lv Lingqi. Yan Shui raised her head and looked at Lu Bu, her eyes filled with concern. "You're back, aren't you tired from today's affairs?" Lu Bu nodded and said, "Yes, it's a bit tiring. But as long as I can be with you, I feel like everything is worth it." Lu Lingqi looked up at Lu Bu and said, "Dad, I also want to go to war with you." Lu Bu touched Lu Lingqi's head and said, "You're still too young. When you grow up, Dad will definitely take you with him." Yan Shui looked at Lv Bu and Lv Lingqi, her heart filled with happiness. She knew that although Lu Bu was a general and their lives were full of danger and challenges, as long as they were together, they could overcome all difficulties. Lu Bu looked at Yan Shui and Lu Lingqi with gratitude in his heart. "I know, this home is his warmest harbor. I can receive the most sincere care and love here, which is my greatest motivation on the battlefield." In the deep night, Lu Bu's family of 3 lay in bed and gradually fell asleep. In their dreams, they may also see familiar figures and hear familiar voices. However, no matter what, they will tightly embrace each other and face future challenges together. Chapter 8. Plan Start. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, Chang'an, the bustling imperial capital, is filled with a sense of unease at this moment. Half a month later, rumors of Ma Tengan preparing to attack Chang'an circulated in Chang'an, and an inexplicable sense of tension spread in the air. Rumors are like wildfire, burning in everyone's heart. In the dust and shouting of the military camp, Lu Bu honed his unparalleled martial arts skills. However, at this moment, he knew nothing about the rumors and gossip in Chang'an City. "I only know that my sword needs to be sharper, and my will needs to be stronger." Inside the Taisha mansion, the lights are brightly lit. Dong Zhuo, this powerful man, is currently sitting opposite Wang Situ. Dong Zhuo's eyes were like wolves and tigers, while Wang Situ appeared much more calm. "Grand Tutor, I have a plan." Wang Situ's voice, like a cold blade, pointed straight at Dong Zhuo's heart. Dong Zhuo's eyes flashed with a hint of interest. "Oh. You said." Wang Situ Su Daolai said, "General Zhang Ji can be appointed as the main general, Zhang Liao and Gao Shun as deputy generals, Wei Su, Song Xian, Ho Cheng, and the surrendered General Su Huang of the Bai Bo army can guard Qinsong." Dong Zhuo's eyes flickered with doubt as he looked at Li Ru. "What's the relationship between this and Lv Bu?" Li Ru chuckled lightly and said, "Father-in-law, please ask Situ." A hint of cunning flashed in Wang Situ's eyes. "Firstly, it can guard against the intrusion of Ma Teng and Han Sui. Secondly, it can test whether Lv Bu is loyal to the Grand Tutor. Thirdly, it can weaken Yang Fenglu Bu's military power to prevent accidents from happening." Dong Zhuo laughed heartily and said, "What a one-stone three-bird strategy. Wang Situ, you should go back and rest first." Late at night, the city of Chang'an is still brightly lit. In the courtyard of Lv Mansion, Lv Bu was sweating profusely, unsure of his future path. A huge conspiracy is quietly unfolding. Wang Situ thought that Lv Bu and Yang Feng had become his pawns, but Wang Yun did not know that the true mastermind in this conspiracy was Lv Bu. The dawn is slightly dewy, and Chang'an City awakens in a new day. Inside the Lv Mansion, Lv Bu gently pushed open the door, and the night's deep sleep refreshed his spirit. Skilled in managing his long beard, his gaze exuded determination. Wearing neatly, Lu Bu wore a beastly face swallowing sky chain armor that shimmered in the morning light, symbolizing bravery. The direction of the palace appears solemn and mysterious under the rising sun. Lu Bu took a deep breath and rode a red rabbit horse towards the palace. The palace lamps along the way illuminate the road and also illuminate one's own heart. "I know that I am about to face a serious debate, a decision related to the future of the country." On the square of the palace, Lv Bu opened a conversation with generals such as Li Guo. Their tacit understanding needs no words to express, and their eye contact is already sufficient. On the other side of the square, civil officials such as Yang Biao and Fu Wan were whispering about today's court proceedings. Lv Bu kept a distance from them, but his respect in his heart remained undiminished. 15 minutes later, a sharp eunuch's voice shattered the tranquility of the morning. Go to court. The brief command was like a key, opening a new day. Civil and military officials took their positions, and the main hall of the palace slowly opened in front of them. Lv Bu took the lead in entering the main hall with firm and powerful steps. I know, this is his own responsibility as a military general and also his loyalty to the country. The sound of the morning bell marked the beginning of a new day. And Lu Bu is ready to face all possible changes. Shrouded in a tense atmosphere. The golden splendor inside the palace contrasts sharply with the solemn atmosphere outside. Dong Zhuo, who once held power over the court, is now standing by the dragon chair with a deep gaze. Xiliang bandit Ma Tang and Han Sui joined forces to attack Chang'an. Everyone, what is the best strategy? Dong Zhuo's voice echoed in the spacious hall, each word filled with majesty and oppression. Above the court, the officials remained silent. They know that this crisis is not insignificant. The fierce name of Xiliang Iron Cavalry has long been awe-inspiring in all directions, and Ma Tang and Han Sui are even more outstanding among them. If they were to invade Chang'an, the consequences would be unimaginable. Taisher, in my opinion, we should immediately dispatch a large army to set up defenses outside Chang'an city and seek assistance from various regions to jointly resist the attack of the Western Liang army. A minister broke the silence and put forward his own suggestion. Dong Zhuo nodded slightly and glanced around the court. Besides dispatching a large army, what other good strategies are there? Everyone looked at each other, and for a moment, no one could come up with a better plan. The safety of Chang'an city seems to be hanging on the front line. Taisher, perhaps we can dissolve them from within. A voice broke the silence, and everyone looked, but it was Li Ru, Dong Zhuo's son. Law. Oh. What's Wen Yu's opinion? Dong Zhuo's eyes flashed with a hint of interest. The reason why the Xiliang army dared to attack Chang'an was simply that it saw our internal and external troubles and was unstable. But Ma Tang and Han Sui had always had a rift. If we can send someone to mediate, maybe we can solve the crisis. Li Ru said quietly. Dong Zhuo pondered for a moment and said, this plan is feasible. Li Ru, let you be responsible for this matter. The magnificent and exquisite carvings inside the palace tell the story of its past glory and glory. However, today's Chang'an is shrouded in a haze. Dong Zhuo, this former warlord, now stands firmly by the side of the dragon chair, holding the lifeline of the empire. His gaze was cold and profound, as if he could penetrate everything. Standing behind Dong Zhuo, Li Ru remained expressionless, as if only a shadow of Dong Zhuo, silently executing his commands. Everyone has nothing to report, then I have something to explain, Wen Yu. Dong Zhuo's voice echoed in the empty palace, with an unquestionable dignity. Li Ru responded with a voice, holding Huang Ling's imperial edict in his hand and reciting in a steady voice, Zhang Ji is the main general, Zhang Liao and Gao Shun are the deputy generals, Wei Su, Ho Cheng, Cheng Lian, and Su Huang are the supplements, and Jia Su is the chief clerk. Go to Chencang to prevent Ma Tang and Han Sui. Zhang Ji, Lv Bu, and others walked out together and knelt in front of Dong Zhuo, their voices resounding and powerful. I will take orders. However, in this resounding voice, there was a hint of disharmony mixed in. That was Lu Bu's voice, and everyone only responded, seeming hesitant. The eyes flickered with complex emotions, including doubt, unwillingness, and deep worry. What is Lu Bu thinking? Was it thinking about the upcoming war, searching for the Shuyuan website www.zhaoshuyuan.com, or did you have a slight doubt about your loyalty? Or perhaps he is just reminiscing about himself who was once loyal to the Han dynasty. Dong Zhuo looked at Lv Bu and thought to himself. Li Ru's voice rang out again, interrupting Lu Bu's contemplation. Lu Bu, listen. Lu Bu instantly regained consciousness and lowered his head, saying, the end will be here. There was no longer the hesitation in his voice, but determination and determination. Dong Zhuo nodded with satisfaction, knowing Lv Bu's strength and loyalty. However, it is also clear that Lu Bu is not completely under his control. This brave and unparalleled general has his own persistence and ideals in his heart. But what about this? In this game of power, only the strong can survive. And he, Dong Zhuo, is the strong one. Control everything, whether it's the fate of the empire or these brave generals. Alright, let's all go down and prepare. Dong Zhuo waved his hand with an irresistible dignity in his tone. Everyone responded in unison and silently withdrew from the main hall. As he watched the crowd leave, Dong Zhuo's lips curved into a cold smile. I know, this empire is no longer his own empire. But as long as he controls power, he can face all challenges. For generals like Lu Bu, there are means to control them. Power, wealth, and status are all his weapons. As long as they still want these, they cannot escape his control. The main hall in Chang'an City gradually returned to quietness. But a new storm is already brewing. At the center of this storm is Dong Zhuo, who is currently sitting on a dragon chair without anyone present. Dong Zhuo knew that his position was not stable. But as long as I am still alive, I will do my best to protect my rights. Because Dong Zhuo knows that only power is the only thing he can trust in this world. Chapter 9. Home in the Heart. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, Lv Fengxian is preparing to ride a red rabbit horse to the entrance of the imperial city and set off for the military camp. And the fiery red rabbit horse waited for its owner in front of the palace gate. General Lv, please stay. Wang Yun, the grand tutor of the court, called out softly from behind Lu Bu. Lu Bu stopped and turned around, looking at Wang Yun expressionlessly. Sir Situ, what's up? His voice was cold and emotionless. Wang Yun seemed hesitant and glanced at Lv Bu. It's nothing, I just wanted to ask General Lv if he's available. I want to talk to you. Lv Bu didn't answer, just looked at Wang Yun indifferently. The gaze revealed an indescribable sharpness and depth. At this moment, Yang Biao walked over and broke the stalemate. Wang Situ, I have something to talk to you about. Looking at Wang Yun. Sir Situ, if someone is looking for you, I'll say goodbye first. Lv Bu seemed to breathe a sigh of relief before coming to the entrance of the imperial city and riding a red rabbit horse to leave the palace. On the streets of Chang'an City, Lv Bu rode a red rabbit horse at a gallop. The thoughts in my heart are as complex as the morning in Chang'an City. I know that in this seemingly calm city, there are countless conspiracies and schemes hidden. Lu Bu knows himself and must find his own path in this. The military camp was already in front of him, and Lu Bu took a deep breath. Knowing that what awaits oneself will be even more difficult challenges and choices. There is no fear, because I know that only by facing it can I find my true self. Lu Bu rode a red rabbit horse into the military camp, and the soldiers saluted him, their eyes filled with awe and admiration. Lv Bu looked at them and felt a strong sense of responsibility in his heart. Knowing that we must fight not only for ourselves, but also for these soldiers. At the center of the military camp, Lu Bu summoned all the generals. They sat together. Lu Bu's momentum is like a rainbow. With a firm gaze at the crowd, he spoke solemnly, Wen Yuan Boang's plan has begun. Do you still remember the mission? Zhang Liao nodded and said in a deep voice, I know, we have a good relationship with Chen Sang, Zhang Xiu, and Su Huang. His voice was full of determination, obviously well thought out. Gao Shun followed closely behind and firmly said, gather the morale of Zhang Ji's soldiers and instigate Zhang Ji to occupy Wudu County. His eyes were sharp, clearly full of confidence in this task. Lu Bu nodded satisfied and looked around at the crowd, saying, "Okay, then let's split up and take action." Everyone left in response, and peace returned to the military camp. But Lu Bu understood in his heart that the challenges they were facing were just beginning. They need to establish good relationships with Zhang Xiu and Su Huang in Qinsang, and gather the morale of Zhang Ji's soldiers. This journey will undoubtedly be full of hardships and challenges. However, Lu Bu was not afraid. They are well aware that only through these challenges can they move towards victory. Grasping the Fangtian painting halberd tightly, looking firmly into the distance, my heart is ready to welcome everything. Lv Bu walked into the bustling Chang'an market from the military camp. The footsteps of walking, calm and firm, seemed to carry endless weight. The bustling traffic and crowds on Chang'an Street contrast sharply with the lonely silence on Lv Bu's body. Lv Bu walked through the crowd, his eyes burning with flames, but he seemed to be searching for something again. Suddenly, a familiar voice shattered the surrounding noise. "Fengxian, I didn't expect to meet you here." Lv Bu turned his head and saw a middle-aged man walking over with a smile on his face. This person is Li Su, his old friend and former colleague. "Li Su, I never expected to meet you here," Lu Bu smiled. "Yeah, things are unpredictable. Let's go have a drink," Li Su suggested. So, the two of them arrived at a nearby tavern. After 3 rounds of drinking, Li Su suddenly spoke up and said, "Fengxian, why are you wandering on the street? What's up?" After a moment of silence, Lu Bu said, "I want to go home." "Going home? Back to the forgotten small village in Taiyuan, Bingzhou?" Li Su asked in confusion. "No, go back to my home in my heart." Lu Bu looked at the glass in his hand and said slowly, "I've been in the military camp for too long. I need time to think and find my true home." "Have you found it?" Li Su asked again. Lu Bu shook his head and said, "Maybe I found it, maybe I'm still searching. But no matter what, I have to keep going." The two looked at each other with a smile and continued drinking and chatting. As night falls, the lights on Chang'an Street dim. Lu Bu, standing at the entrance of the hotel at this moment, had a hint of reluctance and determination in his eyes. Standing beside him is his close friend Li Su. "Brother, are you really leaving?" Li Su's tone carried a hint of regret. Lv Bu nodded silently, his gaze turning to the distance, which was his home and the place where his loved ones were located. He lightly patted the mane of the red hare horse, and the divine steed seemed to feel the owner's affection, emitting a long hiss. "I have to go back now," Lu Bu said with determination in his voice, looking for Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. "I still have my wife and daughter at home, and they need me." Li Su remained silent for a moment, knowing that Lu Bu's decision was unwavering. Patted Lu Bu's shoulder without saying anything more. Lv Bu rode on the red rabbit horse and waved goodbye to Li Su. My gaze once again turned towards the direction of home, where there were my own loved ones and warmth. On the streets of Chang'an City, Lv Bu rode a red rabbit horse at full speed, filled with longing for home and concern for his loved ones. I know, although this journey is long, the direction of home will never change. Finally, Lv Bu returned to the Lv mansion. As soon as the door was pushed open, a familiar scent of home rushed in. His wife Yan Shui and daughter Lv Lingqi welcomed him, Yan Shui's eyes slightly turning red, while Lv Lingqi looked delighted. "General, you're back," Yan Shui said with a slight tremble in her voice. Lu Bu dismounted and walked forward to embrace them. "I'm back." His tone was full of tenderness and love. "Is the meal ready?" Yan Shui nodded lightly and said, "It's already ready." She turned around and walked towards the kitchen. Lu Bu looked at her back and a warm current surged in his heart. "I know that no matter how much wind and rain I have experienced outside, home will always be my warmest harbor. Liu Lingqi held Liu Bu's hand and asked curiously, Dad, did you encounter anything interesting when you went out this time? Liu Bu smiled and scraped Lingqi's nose, of course I do. When you grow up a bit, Dad will tell you slowly. Lv Lingqi stuck out her tongue and said, okay, then. She ran to find her playmate again. Liu Bu looked at her back, his heart filled with indulgence and warmth. I know that no matter how much wind and rain I have experienced outside, the companionship and care of my family will always be my most precious wealth. Chapter 10. Hotel Chat. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, Chang'an City in the dawn is peaceful and solemn. The gentle breeze brushed past, taking away the silence of the night and awakening new days and months. Liu Bu, who had already left his warm bed, took Hu Chair alone to the military camp. Their steps are firm, like an iron will that will not waver in any wind or rain. When Liu Bu arrived at the military camp, he found that the training ground, which should have been full of vitality, now only Wei Yu was training 3,000 cavalry. On the empty ground, Cheng Lian and Chao Xing were chatting leisurely, with no signs of tension or worry on their faces. This unusual calmness made Liu Bu feel uneasy. Just as he was about to ask, he suddenly remembered that Zhang Liao, Gao Shun, and others had already taken their troops to Qinsang yesterday. General, you're here. Wei Yu immediately bowed when he saw Liu Bu coming. There was an imperceptible worry in his eyes. Liu Bu nodded and didn't say anything. I walked up to Cheng Lian and Chao Xing and joined their conversation. The conversation between the three was plain and profound, as if exploring the mysteries between heaven and earth. General, what do you think will happen to Qinsang's trip this time? Chao Xing first broke the silence. Liu Bu remained silent for a moment, his eyes deep, and said, life and death are destined, wealth and honor are in heaven. We only need to do our best in human affairs and listen to fate, but don't you still trust Gao Shun and Zhang Liao's abilities? Cheng Lian nodded and said, General is right. As soldiers, it is our responsibility to defend our country. No matter what difficulties and challenges lie ahead, we cannot retreat. Chao Xing also agreed, yes, we must let those enemies who attempt to invade our homeland know that our Bingzhou wolf cavalry is not vegetarian. Let the enemies fall under the hooves of the horses. In the afternoon, the military camp was filled with silence. The soldiers finished a day of training and were exhausted. Liu Bu looked at them, his eyes full of concern. Cheng Lian told the soldiers to rest for half a day this afternoon and move freely, but do not oppress the people. Liu Bu's voice echoed inside the military camp. Liu Bu's words made the soldiers feel a warm current, and they all expressed gratitude to this kind general. Liu Bu smiled at them and turned to several confidants beside him, saying, Cheng Lian, Wei Yu, Hao Meng, Chao Xing, let's go and have a drink at the hotel. The nights in Chang'an City are always full of mystery and charm. Outside the military camp, the lights on both sides of the street illuminated the faces of pedestrians. Liu Bu and several confidants strolled along the bustling streets, feeling the pulse of the city. They arrived at a hotel called Drunken Immortal Tower. The shop assistant saw Liu Bu and quickly welcomed him, saying, General, you're here. Please come in quickly. Liu Bu nodded and walked into the hotel with his confidants. The interior decoration is luxurious, and the air is filled with the aroma of wine and vegetables. They found a seat by the window and ordered a few bottles of good wine and some specialty dishes. After 3 rounds of drinking, the conversation box opened. Liu Bu listened to Cheng Lian, Wei Yu, Hao Meng, and Chao Xing recounting their respective experiences and thoughts, occasionally interjecting and commenting, creating a very harmonious atmosphere. General, what exactly is life for? Hao Meng suddenly asked. This question plunged everyone into contemplation. Liu Bu put down his glass and took a deep breath, saying, life is all about realizing our own value. As soldiers, we must protect our country and the people. Only in this way can we say that we live meaningfully. Everyone nodded in agreement. Their conversation lasted for a long time until it was still late at night. Outside the window, the lights of Chang'an City have gradually extinguished. Lu Bu and his confidants raised their glasses to celebrate and wished for this beautiful night. Lu Bu stood up and raised his glass to the crowd, saying, "Brothers, let's say goodbye today. I don't know when we can get together again for a leisurely drink and dinner. This glass of wine is a tribute to the longevity of our friendship." Everyone raised their glasses and drank it all in one gulp. After 3 rounds of drinking, Lu Bu led the red rabbit horse out of the hotel. Roaring up to the sky, the sound was filled with lofty aspirations. Then, he flipped over onto his horse's back and walked towards home along the cobblestone road. He has a beloved wife and daughter at home. As soon as I entered the house, I saw my wife busy preparing dinner in the kitchen, and my daughter helping on the side. Seeing his father return, the daughter ran over happily and hugged his leg. Lu Bu stroked his daughter's head and asked with a smile, "What's interesting today?" The daughter blinked and said, "Today, my mother and I went to the market to buy groceries and saw a cute little dog." Lu Bu laughed heartily after hearing this. After dinner, Lu Bu and his wife were sipping tea and admiring the moon in the courtyard. The moonlight sprinkles on the courtyard, everything appears so peaceful and beautiful. Lu Bu held his wife's hand and said, "In a few days, I will rest and take you to the outside of Chang'an City for a spring outing." After hearing this, his wife's eyes slightly turned red, but she knew that her husband's decision was for herself and her daughter. She gently clenched her husband's hand and said, "I will take care of myself and my daughter. There's no need to play, business matters matter." Holding a cup of clear tea in his hand, his eyes revealed a faint melancholy. His wife, Yan Shui, sat quietly beside him, watching him gently. "Husband, why are you so worried?" Yan Shui asked softly, her voice warm like a spring breeze. After a moment of silence, Lu Bu sighed and said, "I'm wondering if our lives are really as glamorous as what outsiders see." Yan Shui smiled slightly and said, "We have a prominent position and endless wealth. What else can my husband not be satisfied with?" Lu Bu shook his head lightly and said, "These are not what I want. What I'm worried about is whether our hearts are really happy, and Dong Zhuo doesn't believe me at all. Just like Ding Yuan, when we go to the battlefield, he always says something nice. If we don't fight, he always wants to weaken my military power. He still trusts those Western Liang generals." After listening, Yan Shui fell silent for a moment on zhaoshuyuan.com. She knew that Lu Bu's doubts were not unfounded. In this bustling city of Chang'an, people's hearts are often filled with desires and anxiety. "Husband, I know your worries," Yan Shui said, "but we cannot let these worries occupy our hearts. We should cherish the present and enjoy every moment in life." After listening, Lv Bu nodded thoughtfully and said, "You're right. We should cherish everything in front of us." They continued to sit in the courtyard, enjoying the peaceful night. Amidst the hustle and bustle of Chang'an City, the tranquility within LV Mansion seems to have become a unique haven. And the conversation between Lu Bu and Yan Shui has also become the most precious memory in their lives. The night is like ink, stars adorn the sky, moonlight pours, casting a layer of silver veil over this quiet courtyard. Lu Bu, at this moment, appears gentle and delicate. He gently grasped Yan Shui's hands, which were cold and trembling, as if expressing her inner fear and unease. "Shui, it's getting dark. Let's go and rest inside." Lu Bu's voice was deep and firm, as if there was a magical force that gradually calmed Yan Shui's heart. She looked up at him, her deep eyes filled with concern and tenderness. She knew that in this chaotic world, she had found a harbor to rely on. Lu Bu held Yan Shui's hand and walked through the stone path in the courtyard into the house. The furnishings inside the house are simple yet elegant, with a faint scent of sandalwood permeating the air, making people feel relaxed and happy. Lu Bu placed Yan Shui on a soft couch and covered her with a thin layer of brocade. As the night deepens, the moonlight falls like water inside the house. Lu Bu and Yan Shui sat side by side, their hearts tightly connected. On this peaceful night, they look forward to the arrival of the future together, hoping to walk through more storms and years together.